Hi, I'm Camille, and this is Stories to Dine Out On. If you aren't familiar with that phrase, a story you dine out on is a story you tell in social situations, like when you're out to dinner with friends. It's a story you have probably told before. You've practiced it. It's personal. It means something to you and reveals something about who you are. With me today is Katherine Lench Meyering. We've been friends for a long time, so would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. My name is Katherine Lench Meyering, and I am an actress, singer, I'm an author, lyricist, a baker, a mother, a wife. I have two adorable pugs named Vinny and Zool.
So would you like to share with us one of your stories you dine out on?
Sure. This story is all about being in outdoor theater. It takes place in 1985. I had been living in New York City, and I was pursuing a Broadway career, and I had been in an off-Broadway show called My Name is Alice. The very nice casting director at the time said, "Oh, I think I've got a play for you. Would you come and audition?" So I came, I sang, I auditioned, I read, and this very soon-to-be famous director said I was perfect for the many parts. This was going to be a play about the Revolutionary War. It was a musical, and it was going to have a cast of, say, 9 or 10, and they would play 50 characters. This was a visionary directress who did a lot of work with puppets and masks. So I didn't really have a lot of experience in that, but they hired me. And one of the reasons that I auditioned for this play, other than the one that I had been contracted to do, I was supposed to go off and do an opera with a very famous composer. His opera was only for a weekend at some college in Michigan. This play, which was to take place in Ipswich, Massachusetts, at a beautiful replica of an Italian villa called Castle Hill, came with health insurance. And that is literally the reason why I chose to do this particular play. We had workshops in New York. We had master classes with a quite famous clown of the day who taught us all sorts of commedia dell'arte and puppets and masks work. We rehearsed in Michael Bennett's studio, and it was very exciting. And there was a feeling in the air that this was going to be something artistic, quite beautiful. And the rehearsal period was full of play and fun and something I had never done. I'd mostly done musicals, and mostly it was kind of, try not to hurt yourself on the set, and mostly the director would say, go over there, do that. This one was very creative, very creative. I had been used to being indoor most of the time. I almost never liked scenery. I was one of those girls that would wear 4-inch heels and walk around the streets of New York. I never left the house without a full face of makeup. So this was a new experience for me, because after our rehearsal period, we all got on a train to Ipswich, Massachusetts, which is this little town north of Boston. And we were all to be housed on this big property. We all stayed in a cottage. So all the actors were in a cottage, and for a little fee, we had to, pitch in some money, and they would provide food for us.
You got health insurance.
I got health insurance.
Had to pay for food and lodging.
Well, room and board in the same way that you would in any kind of a play. I mean, if you were, say, contracted to go do a show in Philadelphia, you would have to pay for where you lived, and you'd have to pay for your own food. If you work it right, you can have, the production company do that for you. But back in the day, we were lucky to have a job, and I was really lucky to have health insurance. So off I went, and it wasn't that much money to pay for this food. Anyway, we rehearsed in the day because, again, it was an outdoor theater, so there wasn't any lighting. And it was supposed to be a beautiful summer experience. There was a little cove down through the woods, and there was a beautiful bay that you could go swimming in. But, it was an 8-hour day, so it was like a job. You rehearsed 8 hours a day. You would go back to your cottage. All of us were housed in the cottage, which means that the The director was there a lot. I don't know if she slept there, but I know she was there a lot. It was kind of like an actor's commune in a way. And it was a long rehearsal process, and it was kind of it was produced by a very famous man, and there was a certain amount of money, but I think a lot of the money went into the sets and not so much into the actors, but the costumes, the masks, this massive set. We all lived together, and I wasn't necessarily the outdoorsy girl. And when we got there, the first couple of days was just beautiful and fantastic and bucolic. But then I didn't really know about how many bugs there were in the woods because I didn't spend time in nature. There were all sorts of mosquitoes and fireflies, as I recall, and no-see-ums, which are these little tiny gnats that can bite you. You don't even see them, and they're just terribly itchy. And in the cottage that we were staying in, I think there were fleas. And I know that in the bathroom, one of my colleagues was up in the bathroom, and a bat flew through the open window, and there were screams. This was our darling Leela, and she would just scream, "Oh my God, bats!" So there were a lot of bats. And I also didn't know then, but now know that if I ever got a mosquito bite, it would swell up to the size of a quarter. And then I guess I was delicious. Maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the rehearsal period, I had poultices on my ankles. Everything was swelling. Everything was itching. It was it was something I was not used to. And everybody was very sweet to me because I was, itching a lot and cranky. We were supposed to be in the outdoor summer, and we were supposed to open, I want to say, the last couple of weeks in June. But what happened was the weather turned, and it got very cold and rainy and lightning, and we had to postpone what was to be an outdoor show 2 weeks because of the weather. So we waited, and during our last rehearsals, it was really cold, and we were rehearsing inside a kind of a rec room late at night. Sometimes they would even shift the rehearsal times. And I remember one night, close to the opening, when the composer of the piece was wrapped in a gray blanket, swigging red wine from a bottle, and it had just gotten very strange and very out of hand. And we pushed that opening, due to weather, into what we all didn't know was greenhead season. Anybody from Ipswich, Massachusetts knows that you leave town during the 2 weeks when the greenhead fly emerges from the sand. I want to say it's about an inch-long horsefly with a bright green head, and it's a slow flying fly, and they all come up and they fly around the town. So inside, say, our cottage that was already filled with fleas and bats were hundreds of stinging, biting greenhead flies. It looked like the Amityville Horror. And you could hear things buzzing. And as you were rehearsing, I played a life-size puppet who had a puppet, so both my hands were occupied. And the stinging, biting flies would fly slowly, land on you, and use their spatula-like stinger mouth to bore into your skin. So often, when I couldn't hit the bugs off myself, some of my castmates would come over and swat one away. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare in so many ways. Food was scarce. Rehearsals were long. We had one of our fellow actors who was a very large man, and we would come back, say, from an 8-hour day of rehearsal, and they would lay out our dinner for the night, which would consist of, I'm not kidding, a bagel and a slice of cheese. Now, for all of us actors that wanted to be slim, that was okay. We were hungry, but this one fellow needed his food. They were trying to conserve, I guess, our money for the food. So after they would serve us this penitentiary meal, they would lock the refrigerator. One night, my fellow cast member got a crowbar out and broke into the refrigerator. It was a wacky time, and we just remember, feasting. We just broke in and ate all the Oreos it was kind of fun.
So they had food they weren't sharing with
Oh
you.
well,
there,
they were rationing it out, but there was no way, and again, they'd come back and say you can't break into the refrigerator at night, so it was almost like being in like a summer camp from hell, literally. But lots of fun there, and lots of adventures. Again, nature was encroaching. And one of the things that happened to me, this actually happened during rehearsal. I want to tell you that when I left the room, I was kind of young. I was maybe in my 20s, 22, I think. I left the rehearsal room right as we were beginning to sign contracts and start the play. And when I came back in, the cast informed me that I was the equity deputy. I had been voted to be the liaison between the actors and the producers and directors. This is a job that you only take once when you're in the showbiz because it's really hard, because you have to enforce rules and you have to say no sometimes to the producers who want you to do things, and you have to keep track of all the hours, and if you go into overtime, it's actually kind of a hard job. And I thought, oh, okay, it's like jury duty. I was also very naive and have learned since that whenever they're doing that election, never leave the room.
it's like when a line of people and they say step forward if you volunteer, and you look around and everyone else took a backward step, and
Right.
you look like you stepped forward, but no.
She's the newbie. She'll do it. Oh, she'll love it. There was, I think, another girl named Katherine in the cast. So the three leads, there were three women and mostly men. And the three leads, we all had nicknames. Somehow they ended up calling me Kitty. That was my nickname. And there was another little gal whose name was Donna, so we called her Donnie. And then Leela, who was somewhere from the South, was called Bug. I do not know why, but those were our names, Kitty, Donnie, and Bug. It was actually quite a beautiful play, but really hard to do. As I said, I played a number of characters. I played a housewoman, where I would lean out and open up some windows and talk to people with an entire house on me. I played the masthead of a ship, a huge, massive masthead of a ship. I think that was just a voice backstage. I played an enormous woman who was supposed to be like a vendor selling things, right in the beginning of the play with a big mask. And then we all played people in a hospital, so we also walked on with hospital beds attached to us and stuff. It was weird. Another friend of mine called it a nachtmare. So yes, it was a little bit nightmarish. So we move forward, and we've postponed, and the town is alight with greenheads, and I think they waited till the greenheads had disappeared for opening night. When opening night arrived, this was outdoors, so they had a line of porta potties for the patrons. And backstage, I went up to one of the producers and asked her, dressed in my large woman costume with my large mask over my head, I asked her, where were the porta potties for the backstage, for the actors and for the crew? And the lady looked at me and said, oh, we're working on that. I think they're coming tomorrow. This was opening night. And I do remember saying, 22 years old, lady, I have to pee tonight. So she had to escort me out in the house, which is, if you're an actor, you never go out in costume. Luckily, I had a mask, so no one would recognize me. And I had to wait in line with the patrons, ladies with shawls, beautiful pearls, as they stood in the grass of Castle Hill and used the porta potty. I didn't want to go out in those woods with the Lyme's tick disease lurking, and the greenhead fly friends buzzing, and the mosquitoes going. Anyway, as we were rehearsing, I can just go back a little bit. When we were rehearsing the play, I remember, too, manipulating the puppet with all the bugs outside and slapping at them. And I do remember little Leela saying at one point, we're losing Kitty. We need to hurry, because the bugs were biting so badly that I really came inches away from a nervous breakdown. And I do remember them coming over and swatting bugs off me as I manipulated my two puppets. We all of us played slaves on a ship. And the visionary director said, wouldn't it be great if you all stood up on this balcony, which was above it. There was no railing, and it was, say, 20 feet in the air above the concrete stage. And she said, I think I want you all to wear, we were wearing slave masks at the time with no peripheral vision, and it was dark. And she said, I'm going to put a big hot white spotlight on you. You'll hold the railing, but it won't be a railing, it'll be a scarf. And won't that look great? And I said to her, 22 years old, I said, we won't do that. What do you mean it'll look fantastic? I said, there's no railing. We could fall on the concrete 20 feet. Oh, it would look so good. I said, oh, no, no, no. And I did find some inner strength then because I squared my little shoulders and I said, we won't do it. So the very sweet set designer built us a little railing, and it did look beautiful. It just was a little bit safer, thanks to me. During the performance, and again, if you've ever been in the theater, everything is a rush. You have to get everything ready for opening night. The set in the front of the house looks beautiful, but backstage is often not finished. So my particular set with my wonderful Dinah Dunwell puppet, the puppet was a life-size lady who lay on a divan, and she had a very tiny mouth, so my hand moved, very slight movements for her mouth, and she spoke, rapidly, and she would say things like, tut, tut, you bashful butcher, and she was very much like this. And then her puppet was named Mr. Teaser. This particular puppet was entertaining the leading man in a bordello, I think. And this...
She had, just to clarify, she had a puppet on one hand.
I had a puppet on one hand and a puppet on the other.
You had the puppet of the courtesan.
Yes.
Who had
a small
in
mouth.
turn a puppet.
Yes, the character had a puppet named Mr. Teaser. And my puppet had a very tiny mouth, and she was laying on a divan entertaining the leading man. And I think they were going to have a night of romantic love. I think there might have been money exchanged. And but the back of the stage where I would kneel on unfinished pine, and the back of the stage was done of pine wood, and I was kneeling, as I recall, kind of on wires for the lighting, with both my arms thrust through the stage like a square with a curtain, but my arms were exposed to the raw wood. So as the leading man was having relations with my puppet, and as he was thrusting and pounding against the puppet, my arms would hit the wood. So it was like bug bite, splinter, ouch, oh, oh, what quit showbiz, ow. So this was so painful. This was the most painful play I'd ever done. And from what I understand, the most beautiful play I'd ever done. So, what don't you do for art? So that was that. That was Mr. Teaser and Miss Dinah. And
the play was 4.5
hours. It ended up being 4.5 hours long.
With an intermission, or
I think there was an intermission.
Just one?
Pardon me?
Just one.
Oh, just one intermission. And yes, it was very long. And this is one thing I did know. Back in the day, well, I think still, you're not really allowed to take a film of a play because a play is protected by Actors' Equity. And this massive, beautiful play was being done by, it was a very large-scale thing. TV producer type people were taking care of it. And they had, I think, done at least this is the rumor. Again, I was backstage doing the play, but the rumor was that they were filming it and that somehow the people from Actors' Equity got wind of it, drove up from New York, and came and confiscated the tapes of this play.
Do you think they destroyed them?
Boy, what I wouldn't give to see it. I hope somebody has seen this play. I hope somebody has those tapes because as I recall, it was supposed to be spectacular and beautiful. And really, to this day, the only truly artistic play I've ever done.
How many performances did the play run for?
I want to say it might have run for, say, 3 weekends or 4. But
So the rehearsal period was longer than
way longer than expected, and we did get a little bit of money back. We got extra salary, and I think I remembered having to write down that we've extended the play. I think we had to re-sign a little contract, but again, this is 1985, so some of the details are fuzzy, but the memory of the bug bites lives on. What was out? There was something else that was kind of fun about it. I know that the producers threw a beautiful clam bake for us, and it was gorgeous because there was, if you would go through the woods past the Brown's cottage where the bats were, braving Lyme's tick disease, there was a beautiful cove, and the producers threw this incredible clam bake. And I remember swimming with a famous actress of the day who had asked me how I had come up with Dinah Dunwell's accent, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I'm swimming with this Academy Award nominated actress, and she's asking me about my acting. I almost plotzed. It was so fun. This really was a nightmarish time. It really was close to nervous breakdown time for me. The bugs were incessant. It was very difficult. The rehearsal period was hard. It was physically exhausting. Nobody got much sleep. It was really a surreal time, almost like being in a Fellini movie. But the best thing that I got out of it was the assistant musical director and I found each other because he was a young, very brilliant pianist, and he said he wanted to compose for the theater. And I had been in the musical theater, BMI, Lehman Ingle Musical Theater Workshop as a aspiring lyricist. I had a one lyric with me, and I said, hey, do you want to write songs? It was really like Mickey and Judy, Hey, do you want to write a song, Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland? Nice. You don't know from Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland? Oh, okay. So in some of the early Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland movies, I think they'd say, hey, let's put on a show. Okay, we will. So he became, we wrote this song called Charlie Chaplin's City Lights in 1985. During our rehearsal, off periods. We'd play it for anybody who wanted to listen. We wrote that first song in 1985, and we have been writing songs now for over 40 years. He's one of my dearest lifelong friends. And to this day, when we want to go back to that nightmarish summer when we first met, we can spend hours rolling on the floor discussing this play. Thank you.
So you got a lifelong friend, and you got lifelong memories.
I have a lifelong allergy to mosquitoes, by the way.
And a lifelong terror of green
head flies. They come slow and they bite hard. And the no-see-em is not fun. And you can spend, a good deal of your summer slapping yourself. And again, if I had but known about, a good bug spray, I think back then we didn't even have like DEET or whatever it is, so you just were fresh meat. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with us, and thank you for listening, and have a good day or night or morning or evening or afternoon, wherever and whenever you are listening.